The year 1492 marked a turning point in world history. When Christopher Columbus crossed the Atlantic and reached the Caribbean, it ignited Europe's fascination with the unknown lands of the West. His discovery was not only a milestone for Spain, but also triggered a wave of competition among other European powers: Portugal, France, the Netherlands, and especially England. While the Spanish rapidly established vast empires throughout Central and South America, much of North America remained a region of exploration rather than settlement. The French focused on the St. Lawrence River region in what is now Canada, engaging primarily in the fur trade. Meanwhile, the Dutch set up trading posts in the region now known as New York, then called New Amsterdam. The English, after several failed attempts at colonization, finally established a lasting settlement in 1607, Jamestown, located in present-day Virginia. Life in Jamestown was harsh at first. Famine, disease, and conflicts with native tribes plagued the colony. But over time, tobacco cultivation brought economic stability and growth. By the end of this era, England had begun to take serious steps toward permanent colonization in North America. These settlements were driven not only by economic ambitions, but also by religious and political motivations. Dissenting religious groups in England sought refuge in the New World, hoping to find a place where they could practice their faith freely, laying the groundwork for future colonies. Following the founding of Jamestown in 1607, England rapidly expanded its colonial presence in North America. By 1732, with the establishment of Georgia, a total of 13 colonies had taken root, each with its own unique characteristics, motivations, and systems of governance. The New England colonies, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Hampshire, were largely settled by Puritans and other religious dissenters seeking freedom to worship. The region's rocky soil and harsh climate made large-scale farming difficult, so the economy relied on fishing, shipbuilding, and trade. Society was organized around strict religious values, and education was highly valued. The middle colonies, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, were more diverse, both ethnically and religiously. Influenced by earlier Dutch and Swedish settlers, these colonies fostered a mix of agriculture and commerce. Pennsylvania, founded by William Penn, became a haven for Quakers and other groups, promoting tolerance and peaceful coexistence. The southern colonies, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, developed economies centered on large plantations. With fertile soil and warm climates, they produced cash crops such as tobacco, rice, and indigo. These labor-intensive farms relied heavily on enslaved Africans, embedding slavery deeply into the Southern way of life. After 1732, the American colonies continued to grow economically and culturally, but that growth also led to rising friction with Britain. A major turning point came with the outbreak of the 7 Years' War in 1756, a global conflict whose North American theatre became known as the French and Indian War. In this war, Britain defeated France, effectively removing French influence from Canada and the Ohio River Valley. However, the war had left Britain with a massive debt. To recover the costs, the British government began imposing new taxes on the colonies. Laws like the Stamp Act 1765 and the Townshend Acts were met with outrage in the colonies. The rallying cry, "No taxation without representation," captured the colonists' core grievance. They were being taxed by a parliament in which they had no elected representatives. Tensions escalated with the Boston Massacre in 1770, where British soldiers killed 5 colonists during a street protest. Public anger surged. Just a few years later, in 1773, the Boston Tea Party became a symbol of colonial resistance. Protesters disguised as Native Americans. In response, Britain passed harsh, punitive laws targeting Massachusetts, known in the colonies as the Intolerable Acts. This crackdown united the colonies more than ever. In 1774, they convened the First Continental Congress, a historic meeting to assert colonial rights and coordinate resistance.
By 1775, tensions had reached a boiling point. When British troops clashed with colonial militias at Lexington and Concord, the American Revolutionary War had effectively begun. What started as a demand for fair treatment had now turned into the first steps toward revolution. By 1775, the conflict between Britain and the colonies had become a full-blown war. The colonists were no longer just protesting taxes, they were demanding independence. The year 1776 became a defining moment. On July 4, 1776, the Declaration of Independence, drafted primarily by Thomas Jefferson, was adopted by the Second Continental Congress. More than a political document, it laid the philosophical foundation of a new nation, based on liberty, natural rights, and the consent of the governed. Early in the war, Britain had a clear military advantage. Its army was better trained, better equipped, and backed by a powerful navy. But under George Washington's leadership, the colonial forces, bolstered by local militias, fought with determination and resilience. The turning point came in 1778 when France entered the war on the side of the Americans. French troops, financial support, and especially naval power shifted the balance. In 1781, British General Cornwallis surrendered at the Siege of Yorktown, effectively ending major hostilities. The war officially concluded with the Treaty of Paris in 1783, in which Britain formally recognized the United States as an independent nation. The American Revolution not only marked the birth of a nation, but also inspired democratic movements around the world. The war was over, but the real challenge for the Americans had just begun: how to govern a new nation. At first, the United States operated under the Articles of Confederation, a system that granted significant power to the states while leaving the central government weak. This proved problematic, as economic instability and interstate conflicts emerged. In 1787, delegates from various states met at the Philadelphia Constitutional Convention. The result was the United States Constitution, which created a stronger federal government balanced by three separate branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. In 1789, George Washington was unanimously elected as the first president of the United States. With a new constitutional framework in place, the United States officially emerged as a democratic republic, founded on the principles of popular sovereignty and rule of law. The colonial era of America was not just about the founding of a nation, it was one of the most significant political and social transformations in human history. Principles like local self-government, freedom of the press, religious tolerance, and elected assemblies became the foundation of modern democracy. However, colonization came at a heavy cost for Native Americans. Loss of land, disease, and cultural disruption altered their lives forever. In the South, the rise of plantation economies and the expansion of slavery left lasting scars on American society. Despite these complex legacies, the American experience inspired freedom movements across the globe. From the French Revolution to independence struggles in Latin America, the ideals born in the American colonies would echo for generations. The colonial history of America is a layered story of exploration, struggle, resistance, and transformation. It represents not just the birth of a nation, but also the emergence of a global model for the pursuit of liberty and self-governance.